I'm sitting here in my living room and I just had a thought. I realized why the orange beanbag that sits in the country's highest office, tariffs, will fail. Traditionally, tariffs have been used to do one of three things: protectionism, bring manufacturing back to the country, or raise money for the country. Tariff downside is that it can only do one of those things at once. It cannot do all three of them. As a result, the economy and those who partake in it find themselves in a in an unstable environment because the orange beanbag wants its tariff to do three things at once, and that's just not how tariff work. But we need to understand how the US lost its manufacturing edge. Under the Clinton administration, they signed the NAFTA free trade agreement with Canada and Mexico. That agreement allowed companies to move their manufacturing facilities to Canada and Mexico, where labor costs were not as expensive as those in the US. But why did they move there? It's more than just labor costs. It is excessive government regulations in the US. It is excessive government environmental regulations within the US. It is excessive government labor regulations within the US. And at the time, it was the excessive and abuse of power of trade unions. I will admit those things are absolutely necessary to protect the worker, but an over but the abusive nature of how it was done in the US pushed manufacturers um, to seek a more friendly or a friendlier business environment than that of the US. Then President Clinton convinced the World Trade Organization to accept China. His motives were, if China joined, then China may become a more democratic country. Obviously, that didn't work. With China now being part of the World Trade Organization and with the greed of Wall Street pushing manufacturers to reduce costs, companies in the US looked at China and saw lower labor costs. Even when they calculated the cost of shipping and tariffs the items back to the US, it was still cheaper than making it here in the uh, it was cheaper to make it in China than it is or was to make it in the US, Canada, and Mexico. Those conditions are still in existence. As much as the Orange Beanbag said he was going to reduce government regulations and make the US a more business friendly environment, he hasn't. Because the one thing he cannot change is how a state is run. Yes, Texas, for example, is considered a more friendly state, but then Texas has the highest poverty population in the US. California is considered a most business unfriendly state, yet California has some of the most successful businesses in the country. The other reason why manufacturers will never come back to the US is we no longer have the advanced educational level and skill necessary to operate the manufacturing machines that are used today. For years, the United States has underinvested in its education system. As a result, we find ourselves behind other advanced economies when it comes to individual talent. based on our education and skill. We just don't have it. Why would I as a company come back to the US to make something that will cost me twice as much to make, and then I have to train someone to do it too? And if you don't believe me, look at the Hyundai plant. They couldn't find the skills that they need in the US to install and train on their machine. They had to fly 375 of their own people to the Hyundai plant in Georgia to teach the local how to install it and how to run it. That's because we don't have the education standards necessary for that type of stuff. Yeah, the Orange Beanbag and his team don't understand how tariff works. And as I have said before, ignorance is expensive. The problem is it's costing the rest of us. And his recent $100,000 for application of the H-1B visa will only make things worse. I suspect the country GDP will experience a significant decline over the next year.